Hello, everybody. Welcome back to We're Talking Movies. I'm Andrew, and as always, I'm joined by Cade. And welcome to the latest edition of our Top 5 Favorite Movies interview series, where this time we're bringing a friend of mine from Discord. This is VolcanBlue. Blue, do you have anything you'd like to say to our 40 or so dedicated subscriber?
Hello, 40 or so dedicated subscribers.
Before we get into the your top 5 favorite movies, would you consider yourself a major film fan?
Yeah, I would consider myself a pretty big film guy. I took almost 6 years of video edit courses throughout high school and college, so I try to keep up to date with all the movies and the news, and I would say I'm pretty invested into it.
Shall we get into your top 5? And starting at the bottom, we have a little slice of 1980s teen nostalgia. We have Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I love that movie.
What is it about this movie that puts it into your top 5? And has it always been one of your favorites?
I remember seeing this movie for the first time in 2011, so I would have been 10 years old. That's that's pretty crazy, but I was homesick one day and I didn't know what to watch, so I watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And after that movie, I'm like, wow, this is such a good like feel good movie, right? I could watch this over and over again and still be happy just by the whole thing. I think it brings in an amazing protagonist. It introduces fourth wall breaking, and I just love the overall like 80s theme of it. It portrays it so well.
It really, really does. And I also consider it a hit, a very good movie. I wouldn't say it's one of my all time favorites. Cade, would you agree?
I mean, I think it's a very good movie from the 80s. I think it's definitely funny. And I think that it's definitely a movie where Matthew Broderick definitely shines in the role. And Blue, are you a Matthew Broderick fan?
I've seen him in other few like properties such as like Modern Family, but I mean this is what I known him for.
Yeah, I would say that's like 99% of the population. It's either this, him voicing Simba in The Lion King, or if you're really, really throwing it back, the protagonist in the movie War Games.
Well, and also, Blue, when you look back at this movie, I guess you kind of answered this a few minutes ago, but I just wanted to ask one more time. So, would you say that for you, that you can watch this movie anytime and it'll just make you smile? Like, is it a good comfort movie for you?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think it's one of those movies where, when I value a movie, I don't value it usually by how great of like, of all of its properties. I value it by if I want to watch it again. I know it's like maybe it's a bit silly, but I think that's how I value things.
I actually remember reading somewhere that actually rewatching films you enjoy is actually good for the mind because it already introduces the same endorphin rush every time
Mhm.
because you know you're going to enjoy it.
Right, right. About this movie as well, I think it has a lot of great iconic scenes. The part where they're trying to get Cameron, his friend, out of bed because he's sick, and then they steal his dad's Ferrari, and they're going through the town and everything. It's just such a great movie.
It really, really is. Happy to see it made your top 5. But moving on to number 4, we have one that kind of become everybody's favorite in recent years. We have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes.
Now, I'm just going to guess you have quite a lot to say about this little masterpiece of animation.
I feel like everyone loves this movie because of its innovative animation. I think it really broke through like the modern genre of animation and like how popular it's become because I feel like everyone's doing the style now, especially with the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And a lot of movies are copying these guys now, but I think it's such a great movie. Strong cast. I love the cast. Jake Johnson as Peter Parker is so good. It's a very emotional story as well, which I do like. And it has a bit of everything for everyone, which I seem to see.
Well, and going into the movie, are you a Spider-Man fan overall?
I grew up watching Spider-Man, so I seen every property of Spider-Man.
Well, here's my next question for that. Do you think it could be argued that this is the greatest Spider-Man movie ever made?
Yeah, I think so.
You hear that, Andrew? He doesn't agree with you. He doesn't think Across the Spider-Verse is the best Spider-Man movie.
I was about to say Across the Spider-Verse is very, very close. Very close.
Right. Yep.
Kate and I recently had a discussion. Like, we put out a review of Spider-Man, the original from 2002, and we spent a good 5 minutes of that video talking about, which is the best Spider-Man movie ever made. So that's why he's
I,
kind of busting my chops about that one.
I literally just watched the video before joining the Zoom call.
So here's something I want to ask about your liking of Into the Spider-Verse. The multiverse concept is kind of becoming a bit of a big thing in movies nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
What about Spider-Verse itself do you think makes it stand out against other movies that have explored the concept, like say what the MCU is doing in recent years, or even something a little bit more small and contained like Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Is this the first multiverse property by Marvel? Not counting like, the animated series or anything like that.
Yeah, because I know the animated series get really complicated. I would say probably. I don't. I feel like they might have teased multiverse stuff before
Mhm.
Into the Spider Verse came out, but I don't think they really like fully embraced it on the big screen until Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness
Right. Yeah, I definitely. Or Loki.
or Loki. Yeah, I honestly completely forgot about that one.
What I think this one sets apart really is, when I compare it to Flash, right? You get two Barry Allens and a Batman. And I feel like their characters are so unengaging and you can't really understand what they're achieving or wanting, like what their emotional stance. In Into the Spider-Verse, you get five different Spider-Mans who you're always like you get what they're understanding, you understand their emotional appeals and why they're doing what they're doing. Like, why are they Spider-Man? I just feel like their storytelling in Into the Spider-Verse is the best I've ever seen in animation or in live action, to be honest.
Well, that is certainly some high praise.
Well, and here's one last question I want to add before we move on to your number three. Have you already seen No Way Home?
I have.
Where would you say that this movie sits against No Way Home? Do you still think it's better than No Way Home, or do you think No Way Home is close?
No Way Home is, I have a tier list of my Spider-Man movies, but I remember putting No Way Home not too close to the top because I feel like it was more nostalgia filled, but I still love the movie. It's still great.
Before we move on, just on a scale of 1 to 10 now, how excited are you for Beyond the Spider Verse whenever that does eventually come out?
Like a 9, 10. I don't know. I need to see like a teaser or something.
Well, a couple weeks ago, we did our most anticipated movies of 2024 video, and I put Beyond the Spider Verse at 1, thinking it was coming out this year, not realizing that it had barely gone into production before the actor strike hit. So,
Mhm. I actually I have a friend who worked on Across the Spider-Verse. He was part of the animation department and it was during COVID he had to do it and I've never seen someone so miserable because he had to lock all his like windows, close all the blinds so no one can see through his house. And he was just glued to his computer, just animating all day. And I felt so bad, but he cooked. He cooked. But at what cost?
I was gonna say he cooked, but he probably probably was more happy when it was over than
Probably.
when he was at the beginning. All right, moving on to number 3, we have something that we were actually talking about a little bit before we even started recording. We've kind of discovered that we're all a big fan of this one. Number 3, we have the Iron Giant. And
Hmm.
what is it about this very underappreciated movie that makes it reach your top 3?
I'm a sucker for animation. I don't know if you guys can tell. I love it. I love like the story between man and machine. I feel like this one does it really well. When I think of like Terminator or something like that, I'm not crazy about Terminator, but I would prefer a story like The Iron Giant more than, robots uprising. This one just does it really well. And I like the nostalgic like 1950s settings of it where they're playing like a classic homage to sci-fi and I think it was around the Cold War era, so you would get a lot of references from that. And I think I love Brad Bird, the director who did this movie. He's done The Incredibles and I think he's done, I can't remember the other one, but
I
he
believe he also did Ratatouille, and I know he was the director, obviously not animation, but Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol.
yeah, he's done Ratatouille, Iron Giant, Incredibles.
Actually, Blue, while we're just talking about Brad Bird right now, my question is, so like we just said, he's obviously directed movies like the Incredibles movies and Ratatouille. Are you also fans of those movies as well? Like, or would you say they're as good as the Iron Giant, or would you say that this movie is still better than all of those in your opinion?
Oh, I think this one's better than all of
Wow, that is again some very high praise.
them. I'm all about praise.
Now it's better than being cynical all the time. Trust me, I tried that way of life and it didn't work out too well.
Well, and also, Blue, one other thing I wanted to ask is when you look back at the Iron Giant, so obviously, in your opinion, it's a movie that still holds up. What about it do you think still holds up, though? Do you think it's the story, or do you think it's more than that?
I think it also has to do with nostalgia for me because I hold some kind of like an emotional toll to this movie because in 2004 I went on a vacation near I used to be big into skiing and snowboarding with my family, so we would rent out a cabin, and in this cabin there were a wall of VHS tapes, all these movies, and out of all of them I chose the Iron Giant because big robot because I thought that was so cool. I played it and I loved it. It was a movie I would remember for the rest of my life. And every time I see it, it would just bring me comfort. And I really do love the story too. It's a heartwarming friendship tale, which I love.
Yeah, and also one other thing, before we move on to your second favorite, one thing I've noticed looking back at this movie, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think this movie actually kind of has an underrated performance by Vin Diesel as the titular character.
Only a few lines, but he kills it.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, especially coming from an actor who have in the more recent years has kind of garnered a reputation for not being the most emotional person on the planet, and yet somehow made you cry for a giant robot that only spoke in choppy utterances.
Also, the characters are great in that movie.
No, it really is, and again, severely underrated,
Mhm.
underappreciated animated movie. I don't think enough people talk about it. Moving away from the Iron Giant and moving to something a little bit more contemporary, I believe is the word I'm looking for. Coming in at number two, we have one that both Kate and I were surprised to see on here: La La Land.
Mm.
Are you a big musical fan? And if so, what are some other ones that you enjoy, and what makes this one unique? Because musicals are obviously a very popular medium in Hollywood.
I am I am like a underground musical fanatic, kind of. I love La La Land, but I also do love Les Mis. I love that movie and the play. And then I recently watched The Greatest Showman with Hugh Jackman, and I thought that was amazing too. But I mean, not as great as La La Land, like a B plus maybe. But yeah, I mean, I love musicals. They're fun to watch.
Yeah, and one other thing about that's special about this movie for sure, aside from the music and Damien Chazelle's direction, is definitely the chemistry between Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling. And also, one other thing I wanted to touch on is so one thing that I think was, a lot of people were divided on, at least from what I saw, was when it came to the ending of this movie. I know that there were some people who didn't like the ending, but over time they've come to like it more. There were some people I know who definitely liked the ending. Where does the ending sit with you as an audience member? Have you always liked the ending of this movie, or have you been divided on it? Yeah, where does it sit with you?
I think it was like troubling at first, but now I feel like it leaves a lasting impression. That's what I feel. I feel like it makes it stand out in all of cinema. I like how it ended because it makes you feel warm but sad inside. When I watch movies, I think of more like of an emotional kind of overview of movies. So I feel like that one made me feel different, which I really liked.
Yeah, that's definitely a unique way to end a movie for you to feel both warm and sad at the same time. So I think that's
Mhm.
something that the actors and the story of the film, and also Damien Chazelle as a director and storyteller, that you really have to give credit to.
Oh yeah, I think he wrote the new movie with Babylon. Did he
Yes,
write?
Babylon.
Yeah, he wrote Babylon. Could I make one more comment?
Go ahead.
By all means.
The soundtrack is amazing. I did not know Ryan Gosling could sing. I mean, I don't count the Barbie movie, but he kills it in this. And also the concept of LA is really well done in this movie. It makes LA a character, which I feel like a lot of people underestimate. Like it's become like an area for influencers to like have a journey, and they do it well. It's not all about success. It's also about failure.
Yeah, I think that's something that's unique with all types of movies. If your movie can also make the setting feel like a character of its own, that's
Mhm.
definitely something special.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Well, some very interesting things to say about La La Land coming in there at number two for you, Mr. Vulcan in blue. But we reached number one. And number one, you told us your favorite movie of all time is Blade Runner 2049, the sequel to the cult classic film of 80% the same name. What makes this your favorite movie of all time?
I can list you 10 things I love about this movie. The visuals, the storytelling, the performances, the Hans Zimmer score, the world building, the thought-provoking themes, the directorial visions, the sound design, the character complexity, and the cinematic ambiance.
That is 10. Well, congratulations. Well done. So clearly a very, very big fan of this film.
It is it is my favorite movie of all time. It is the best sequel of any movie that's ever come out. I will stand on that statement. I've made a TikTok about me. I did like a review on TikTok of why this movie is the best. And I didn't even explain why. I just said it's the best. My dad showed me the original Blade Runner when it came out, and I love that movie. I love movies. I don't know if you guys can tell.
Yeah,
And
you might have given off one or two hints
yeah.
about that fact.
When the second one came out, it wasn't really talked about. No one was talking about it. It did really bad in the box office, which is a shame because it's such a good movie.
But just touching on the original real quick, because we were talking about it as a sequel, obviously, because you said this is the best sequel ever made. What do you think that this movie does so well with honoring the original? Do you think it does a great job honoring the original film?
Yeah, I think it does it what a lot of other films wish they could do. I've noticed this trend in Hollywood where they'll make sequels 30 years later and they come out very poor and they'll usually kill off the main character and just make a rip off of a new one, right? This one, I mean, they do kind of rip off the main character with Ryan Gosling's Officer K, but he has his own story, which I like. It's not like he has to do the original actor Harrison Ford had to do. They also involve his character in the new one, and they don't show him as how do I say this?
It's not a carbon copy of the same story. They're the story of the original and the story of 2049 kind of intertwined, but they're not
Mhm.
carbon copies of each other. Is that kind of what
Ex-
you're getting at?
exactly. That's exactly what I mean. They tell two different stories, but they share the same kind of message or motive.
Well, and were you surprised that they didn't kill off Harrison Ford's character in the film? Was that something you were kind of expecting to happen?
What year did 2049 come out again?
2017.
So that was after Han Solo died. Yeah, I kind of was expecting, but I'm glad they didn't. I think he should have he played a good role in the movie. They should not have killed him.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great way of showing how this movie really honors the original in terms of how it honors legacy characters, but also the story that the original told as well.
It's a great movie.
So clearly, you're a very big fan of this movie, and Kate and I are both big fans of it as well. This is another great movie by Denis Villeneuve, and I think his direction. I think he was the perfect choice to direct a sequel to. Well, let's just go out and say, kind of complicated, sort of thought-provoking sci-fi film from the '80s
Yep.
Mhm.
that was originally brought to life by Ridley Scott. And I think we can all agree Denis Villeneuve the last few years has kind of cemented himself as maybe like the new director in science fiction, considering the fact he had
Mhm.
this, he had Arrival, which was phenomenal, and obviously he had Dune Part 1 and soon to be Dune Part 2. Blue, would you say you're a fan of his direction as a whole, or is this kind of just one movie out of his filmography you're a fan of, or something in between?
I did see Dune. I was excited for that movie, but I was left a bit disappointed because I felt like it was a very long, no, like a boring, kind of bit boring until the end. Like I've read the book. It does do a good job of adapting the book. I just felt like it was very boring. I'm sure part two will be very good because that's where like the main action stuff happens.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to expound upon on any of your top five favorites, Blue, before we wrap this up?
Um, Obviously, I showed a lot of praise for these five movies. That's because they're literally my top five favorite movies. I am very critical on some, like a lot of movies as well. So for these to be my top five says a lot.
All right. Well, is there anything you want to shill while you're here before we sign off?
Let's see. Okay, I am a photographer, Photoshop expertise, video editor, and thumbnail maker for a couple of YouTube friends I have. You guys can follow me at blues_edits, and maybe we can work together.
We will definitely keep that in mind. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Blue. You were an excellent guest. You have quite a very top five, and we always love that in a guest.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And with that, I've been Andrew. That has been Cade. And again, special thanks to VolcanBlue for joining us for this episode. This has been the We're Talking Movies show. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And also remember to follow us on Instagram and Threads, with X and Facebook and Letterboxd hopefully coming in the near future. Thank you very much. And also, thank you very much. We recently just hit 40 subscribers, and we're going to keep pumping out the good content. Thank you, and we will see you soon.